.66 degrees outside at 16 minutes past the 8 o'clock hour on Tuesday, July the 18th. Chris Lenois back with you for hour number 3 of the Green Mountain Mornings program. And on Tuesdays, we are always joined by members of the media to talk about local stories. Bob Audette in the chair today, the day editor of the Brattleboro Reformer. Good morning to you, sir.
In the hot seat. How are you this morning?
Indeed. Doing all right. And of course, whenever we do these hits with the media, we want to thank Brattleboro Savings and Loan for their financial support of the partnership with Brattleboro Community Television, being in here and documenting our conversations and then playing them later on social media as well as on their cable channels. Brattleboro Savings and Loan is an ultra-local programming sponsor of BCTV's live events and municipal meetings in addition to these segments with members of the local media. Bob, circumstances put you in the lead of this story around New England Center for Circus Arts of Chris Mays basically taking a day off and you ending up at the select board meeting last Tuesday. I was watching at home on BCTV. And actually, I was out of the room for a second, just kind of doing some cleanup of dinner in the kitchen, and I come back in the midst of the public comments where usually nothing ever happens. And I'm listening to what's going on and the different conversation going on. I'm like, wait a minute, what happened? It had to be a similar kind of reaction for you.
Exactly. And I totally blame Chris Mays for this mess and thrusting me into this. How dare he take a week off on vacation and asking me to cover the select board meeting. And normally I would go to the select board meeting, but I was so busy that day with my other duties that I said, well, I'm going to work at work and I'll watch it on the TV at work as well. And that way I can take notes and listen. And if I hear anything, then I can pay attention. And I had made the mistake of tuning into Channel 8.
Oh, did you?
And I was
watching,
on 10? I was watching you and our new staffer, Harmony Birch, talk about the recent homicide trial.
Right.
And it's getting past 6:15, and I'm thinking, why aren't they switching over to the select board meeting? And I was like, it came around to 6:30, and I'm like, oh, maybe I'm watching the wrong channel. So I switched over to 10, and I was like, oh, what did I miss? Because you always miss something at the beginning. But they had just started public comment. And the gentleman, I don't remember his name, but got up, the first guy who spoke said that Serenity and Elsie had been pretty much unceremoniously terminated. And I had this, like, my brain went dead for like 5 or 10 seconds because it was like human dial tone. Like, I couldn't believe the news, right. Probably like you.
Was that sentence really what I just heard? I came in like, it's hard to believe Serenity and Elsie are gone. I'm like, wait a minute, what? And that they were not only of their own volition, but terminated.
And normally our A1 stories have to be done at 6 p.m.
Right.
Because we have a very early deadline. And this is 6:30 when I'm hearing the news, and I'm looking at Melanie Winters, who's our night editor, and she's looking at me, and we both sort of had this brain dead stare like, what do we do now? So I'm thinking to myself, well, I'll just listen, and then I'll write it on Tuesday, and we'll put it I'll write it on Wednesday, and we'll put it in paper on Thursday. I think, no, that's probably not very good. So we basically had a stop the presses moment.
Wow.
And I had to turn off the tube and start making phone calls. And fortunately, I was lucky enough to reach Serenity and Elsie as soon as I dialed the phone. And they were like, you must be watching the select board meeting, because they knew exactly what I was talking about. And at that point, I started receiving these emails as well. Are you watching the select board meeting? Are you there? Are you reporting on this? And we were able to get our first story probably about 5 to 8, and 8 o'clock's our deadline to get to the printer. And I was able to get that all together. And it was, there are days when you sit at your desk and wonder, oh God, what am I doing today? This is so boring. And then there's other days like, I don't know where to even stop. This is so exciting. And Tuesday night was one of those days where they remind you why you're in the business.
Yeah, it is exciting. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of emotions involved with the people directly involved, but for the media, it is interesting to watch this, and especially the twists and turns the stories have taken. He said, she said with a lot of this stuff. That's really the thrust of your op-ed today, which I'm sure you were working on, but it's kind of in lieu of any update. You and I were just talking about how we got word last night that negotiations were ongoing. They expected to post a class schedule today. I didn't hear anything from anybody about them breaking the impasse.
No, neither did I. And I'd gotten a number of emails from their liaison with the media yesterday about we're sending something out. And I'm like, I need it now. And, by 8 or 9 o'clock, the last time I checked my email, I hadn't seen anything. So I assume they hadn't reached any sort of agreement, or they decided to wait till this morning to release it. But we had decided to take a step back, and I had wanted to write an editorial for Saturday's paper on the NECCA issue, but I had gotten so buried with news, and it seemed like every time I turned around, there was something new to write about news. And, we kept getting letters to the editor. We had that 3 pages of letters.
3 pages of letter, all in support of Elsie and Serenity.
I've received one letter that's tentatively, I wouldn't even say wholeheartedly, but tentatively in support of the board's decision, and that'll be in Wednesday's paper.
Right. Well, and your op-ed certainly talking about some of the tone deafness of the way this has been handled in the public, but at the same time, that's part of the problem is we don't have all the answers yet. It's never black and white when you're talking about personality conflicts, and we'll be able to get into some of this in the second segment here. But we're really still just kind of scratching the surface on the story 1 week after it broke.
And like you said, it's never black and white. It's always gray. But the board, former board members, current board members, prospective board members, the current executive director, all of them are hiding behind the personnel decision issues. So they can accuse us of not covering the whole story, but they're not giving us the whole story either. And we have had to rely on Elsie and Serenity and the coaches and the Circus Arts community around the world, which is totally flabbergasted. Yeah. I mean, this isn't just a Brattleboro thing.
No,
this is around the world.
But it is also a Brattleboro thing, and I think you really did a great job capturing that in your op-ed. And I've certainly been saying, I mean, it's such a shame. This has been nothing but a good news story for this community, for this school up until this point. And all this stuff apparently was bubbling under the surface as we were hearing about this great new campus up on Putney Road and stories that your reporters are covering about all the great things that instructors and students from NECCA are going off and doing. And so it really is, it's heartbreaking for a lot of people, even if they have no direct connection to this school, right?
Well, we'd had an inkling that there was some difficulty with raising funds, but, we didn't ever think it was anything not normal for a nonprofit, that has a specialized function that they were raising money for this. It never dawned on us that there was this deep disturbance going on between Elsie and Serenity and the board. I would have never even thought of that. No one had reached out and said, you really should talk to these people. So we always, whenever we heard stuff about it, we just said, okay, we need to write an article to help them raise money. That was our, because NECCA is so important to Brattleboro. It's so important to the culture and the spirituality and the financial health of this town.
Yeah. Bob Audette, day editor of The Reformer, has an op-ed, Brattleboro Can't Afford to Lose NECCA, urging all the parties to put aside their differences and come to a solution for the betterment of the school and of Brattleboro. 802-254-5286. If you have anything you want to say, we'll take the conversation back up after the bottom of the hour news break, as well as the Morning Almanac with Arlo Mudgett, sponsored on Tuesdays by Chelsea Royal Diner. 66 degrees outside at 22 minutes before the 9 o'clock hour. Emerson, Lake, and Palmer by special request for Bob Audette, day editor for The Reformer, here in the studio. Perfect choice, sir.
It seemed Carnival 9 was definitely appropriate for the topic.
Yes, indeed. We are talking about the New England Center for Circus Arts, the ongoing story and impasse between the coaches and the founders and the board. Right now, the school is closed. They are continuing to try and resolve that. Now, and I guess I kind of want to use this segment, unless anybody wants to call in, 802-254-5286, and share some thoughts about it, kind of as much on-the-record information as we can exchange here during this. It strikes me that there's a couple of different issues here that aren't necessarily intertwined when you have the coaches and the founders, because the coaches also have been concerned about safety. And I'm sure the founders are concerned about safety as well, and some of the way the board is addressing some of the equipment issues on the new campus. Does it seem to you that that's a little separate from this status of Elsie and Serenity as artistic directors?
I'm not really sure where the linkage is. I know that I know that that's something that the coaches and Elsie and Serenity have talked to me about making sure that everything is rigged correctly, inspected by certified inspectors. I don't know the complete story there. I don't know how it relates to what happened on last Monday. It's not very transparent at this point. So.
Because it keeps coming up when you get statements, and plenty of Facebook posts not only talked about how we stand with Elsie and Serenity, meaning the coaches, or that open letter from students and faculty too, but also raising it, and that was raised at the select board meeting last Tuesday. While people were airing the dirty laundry of the school, they were talking about some of the safety issues here. So I was trying to see, I don't know right now if the negotiation is just about Elsie and Serenity coming back in their status, or if this safety issue is mixed in as well.
I think the safety issue has been part of the whole discussion. And again, like I said, I don't really know what that's all about. I don't understand the technical specifications or the legal requirements about ensuring all the equipment is safe and ready and inspected on a regular basis. And I heard that both from Serenity and Elsie and from the coaches about safety and how they felt that the board and the executive director weren't addressing it correctly. And I don't know if they were trying to cut corners, save money here and there, say the coaches could do the inspection. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Because the board and the executive director, they're not talking to us at this point.
And you got to think there is at least some minimum standard of safety that gets inspected by somebody in something like a circus school, right? I hope so.
And
right?
you would think these coaches are professionals. They've been practicing this art, some of them for decades, and they would know what they need to do to ensure everything is safe and ready for their students. But at the same time, you probably need someone from outside the organization to come in and say you're doing it right. So who knows? And we know that the coaches have talked about grievances they've had against Serenity and Elsie. What those grievances are, I think, have more to do with the direction of NECCA. They were the artistic directors, and where they wanted to see NECCA go, I don't know. And where this difference was with the coaches, I don't know either. But the coaches have told us those grievances are minor compared to the problem they're having with the board.
Yeah, and I do want to get into this status of Elsie and Serenity as artistic directors, and really the crux of the conflict between the board and them in terms of the direction of the school. We do have a caller on the line, though, right now, so I do want to defer to them. KBT, you're on the air.
My quick question, suggestion, idea is, do you think it could be a thing of artists not being business people and the business people taking it away from the artists, sort of?
Bob, you want to start there?
Sure. I mean, we see that a lot. Thanks for the question.
Thanks for the call. Yeah.
I mean, we see that a lot. It's not just with artists either. It's with nonprofit organizations in general that they're founded with a specific mission. And as they evolve and they grow and they become more secure in their mission, sometimes a board rightfully steps in and says, if you want to keep pursuing this mission, you need to make these changes, which may be at odds with any vision that they were founded with. And I could see that as well happening at NECCA, where they've reached this point where they're having growing pains. They're in a new facility. Their reputation is stellar. But at the same time, they haven't raised enough money to pay for that facility still.
Right.
And that raises questions as well. So they went ahead and pushed ahead and built this when they've collected like 1.3 of the 2.5 they need. Did they rush into that construction? Did that cause some of the problem that we're seeing manifesting itself these days? Was there an issue with the capital campaign? I'm asking these questions. I'm not implying that anybody did anything wrong either. And folks on the capital campaign, maybe they could answer those questions. Right. And maybe they could help us understand if maybe they did rush into the construction of the building.
Right. Well, and independently of that capital campaign, the financials, you've found some of that information. I found some of that information and shared it on the air. This is a very financially healthy institution. They're as of 2015, and the latest round of financials I've understood aren't coming out till later this year. But they're $1 million organization when you're talking about revenues. And when you get to a certain size as well, some of those gray areas when you're a smaller nonprofit, that you can maybe sort of, elide or gloss over or just hope nobody's looking. You have to start dotting your I's and crossing your T's. And even Serenity and Elsie seem to have admitted this. I've seen in some of your reporting, they've talked about, our dynamic needs to change as far as our relationship to NECCA, especially since they have this for-profit Nimble Arts. It seems to me that really where the impasse is as what that change is going to be. And somebody's not telling the truth here, because Elsie and Serenity keep saying they're getting locked out of meetings and that the board won't meet with them. And then the board's official statement was, we have an offer out to them on how to change this dynamic, and they won't respond to this offer. Somebody's not telling the truth there.
And again, like you noted, it's a he said, she said situation. I have an email from Serenity that she shared with me that she had sent to the coaches about her impression of her dysfunctional relationship with the executive director and how she called him to the carpet. And he basically said that if you air any of this, I will have you fired.
Right.
And she really feels, my impression is she really feels this is a personal vendetta against her for her calling him inept and circulating that opinion with the coaches.
But on the same token, the board, Michael Helmstader, they sound pretty confident in some of these accusations. You have reporting from Elizabeth Harris Warner, the board president. We've spoken to her as well regarding the need for an audit, some of these financial things that they want investigated here. Those are pretty serious accusations to throw out there unless you really feel confident in them.
I think an audit would be whether there was a problem or not. An audit is a good answer, is a good, idea, a good business practice, nonprofit or not. But from what I see of this situation and the way the board has handled this, I see it more as hubris rather than confidence. And I think this board is really walking on the edge of destroying NECCA altogether. And I put most of the onus on them because their actions in terminating Elsie and Serenity just seemed totally tone deaf. I don't know what's going on. Maybe Elsie and Serenity are totally wrong in this situation, but the way the board has handled it is just awful, and they should know better.
I will take the counterpoint just for the sake of good radio where we disagree. But they have an offer out to Elsie and Serenity. They apparently didn't show up to the meeting, so the vote was taken to terminate. That would have been the end of it if the NECCA community didn't decide to go out, knowing BCTV, knowing the media was at the select board meeting, and air this dirty laundry out there. This could have been kept in-house. It was really Elsie and Serenity's side with the coaches, with the NECCA community, that have made this into a public spectacle.
And what's wrong with that? I mean, circus is a public spectacle.
Right.
And they want Elsie and Serenity to return as artistic directors. The board has said you can't come back as artistic directors, but you can come back on a contractual basis, which tells me that they want them to come back and be coaches.
Right. Does it mean that, well, actually, they would still be the founders, though? They would still be these figureheads, even if they were just back as coaches. And they've told you, some of the reporting you've had on Elsie and Serenity, they're not necessarily interested in being artistic directors anymore, is my understanding.
Yeah, and I haven't really gotten into that. That might be a future discussion with Serenity and Elsie and what they would need to come back, if not as artistic directors.
Yeah, if this offer wasn't good enough that they wouldn't even respond to it, what would be good enough?
Maybe they need to be members of the board.
Yeah.
And when that board, because that board's going to be reconstituted, there's no way it can survive the way it is now.
Right.
And I know there's lots of respectable people in the community that want to be on that board to help guide NECCA into the future. Now, whether that happens, it's probably not going to happen until after July 28th, until the executive director steps down, or if he doesn't step down sooner. Right. So but at that point, is the damage too much?
Yeah.
Can NECCA recover? And again, I reiterate, this is a ridiculous argument. These people need to figure this out, and they need to figure it out as soon as possible.
Well, and another question mark to take myself out of devil's advocate role here and bring it back to, we keep talking about the board. Who is on this board at New England Center for Circus Arts right now? You go to their page, and there are 4 members of this board listed. One of them is Elizabeth Harris Warner, who is resigned her position or is going to resign her position. According to the folks I've checked with, the vote I guess it's a week and a half ago now on this, was 7 people, was 5-1 with 1 abstention. What happened to these other board members? Where did they go? Up in smoke?
I've tried to talk to ex-board members. I've only had 2 that would talk to me on the record. The numbers of ones that I was able to contact, I left messages and never heard back. I do not know what the dynamic was and why there was such a high turnover. I don't know if it was because of board leadership or because of Elsie and Serenity or because of the new executive director. I don't know. There's so many unanswered questions.
But we don't even know the names of those board members. Like you spoke to Kate Anderson. She wasn't part of that vote. She had resigned a couple of months ago. Yeah. Who were these board members, and did they vote and then resign? I mean, this to me,
must have,
right? Because then the question gets raised: was there a quorum? Was there a legitimate vote even to have this happen? I mean, when you're talking about state law in Vermont here, you have to have that, and I don't know exactly where the line is drawn on what is publicly available information from minutes and things like that.
Well, being a nonprofit, their minutes, their information's not available to the public.
None of it.
But that would be up to an investigator like the Attorney General or someone to request and say, I want your minutes. I want to know who made these decisions. I want to know the whole timeline. Whether that actually happens is probably going to be contingent on this agreement that they're trying to work out, that they promised to have an agreement last night. We still haven't heard anything.
Right. And
so who knows what's going to happen.
Right. Now, and the last public statement we've heard from NECCA inviting the coaches back, urging the founders to try and resolve this issue is NECCA won't last a week financially without them coming back and doing the classes.
They charge thousands of dollars for these workshops, and that income flow has to be crucial to a nonprofit organization, and to have people say, I'm not paying anymore. I want my money back. I'm not making any more donations on your building campaign. If the board, I don't understand how the board didn't think this wasn't going to happen either.
No,
and they were totally unprepared.
Right.
They were totally unprepared for the community backlash in Brattleboro and around the world. And it just goes, I don't want to impugn anybody's integrity, but it makes you question whether they thought this whole process through. Okay, we're going to fire Serenity and Elsie. How do we react when the world is banging down our door?
Right.
And they were not ready for that.
Yeah, they definitely weren't ready for that. This financial question, though, and this will be the last little bit before we go, I wonder about that, how hollow of a threat that is. Again, you look at the publicly available financial information, they supposedly have like $770,000 in liquidity. They should be able to sustain themselves for several months under this, unless, again, there's some sort of financial issue going around behind the scenes.
I don't know. And an audit should be expected. And I mean, you've got an executive director that's making almost as much as the 2 founders.
Right.
It makes me wonder.
Yeah. Yeah, lots of question marks. You're doing a great job of keeping on it. You and Harmony, and I guess you've got Chris now that he's back. You're all working on this. There's other news going on. You guys, you know about that, right?
Like
Vernon voting today on Brexit and
the Winchester plane crash, the unfortunate fatal in Townsend, which we're following up on now. I mean, last week was a really busy news week for us.
Yes, indeed. Well, keep up the good work, Bob, and thanks for your time this morning.
Thanks, Chris.
And not only in the print edition, but online at reformer.com. We'll be back to wrap up this edition of Green Mountain Mornings right after these messages.